This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Dr. Debra Clary, who is a leadership strategist, researcher, and executive coach with over 4 decades of leadership experience at some of the world's most iconic companies, including Frito-Lay, Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, and Humana. Relying on her doctorate in leadership and organization development and her inquisitive approach to every facet of life, Debra has inspired hundreds of executives and teams to achieve business success, guided by the principle that curiosity is not a soft skill, it's a superpower for growth. Today, after forging a path as a leading curiosity expert, Debra advises Fortune 500 companies and mission-driven teams on how to harness the power of curiosity to encourage transformation and foster connection. Whether leading billion-dollar brands, advocating for women's leadership, delivering a viral TEDx talk, or performing a sold-out one-woman off-Broadway show, Debra is guided by her mission to ask bold questions and follow wonder. Her book, The Curiosity Curve, is the culmination of years of research and real-world experience, coaching hundreds of leaders through transformation and empowering individuals and organizations on their unique journeys to success. So, Debra, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, give us a little context. I always like to start with that. Just kind of tell us, where you grew up, what were some of your early influences, and how you kind of ended up in this as a curiosity expert.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. So I was born and raised just outside of Detroit, and went to, I would have to guess say whose major influence in my life would be my parents, who were, at the time, I didn't know it, but they were adventurous and they were modeling curiosity. And they're also intellectually curious as well and pushed us to continue to expand how we thought. So that would be my influences. I went to school at Michigan State, then I went on to grad school at George Washington in DC. And
Okay.
my first job out of business school was driving a route truck for Frito-Lay. So
Okay.
when people say they started at the bottom, I'm right there with you because I did start at the bottom. Teamsters Local 337 and Frito-Lay believed everybody needed to start at the bottom to really understand what it meant to run a route, to be a part of the union, the Teamsters. And so I did that for about 9 months before I was promoted after being a route driver. And I spent a decade at Frito-Lay in various sales, operating, and marketing type roles. And then I was recruited away by the Coca-Cola company. And I also spent about a decade at Coca-Cola in Atlanta. And I had a global account, so it allowed me to see the world and understand differences in cultures and people and how business got done differently around the world. And then, Steve, I went to the hard stuff.
Okay.
I went to Jack Daniels, where I
Yeah.
was actually the VP of strategy, but on the wine division. They had a wine division at the time. And so it was challenging. I had to spend all this time at Napa Valley. I was wine tasting. I was working with distillers and winemakers. So it was a pretty tough
Yeah.
job.
Oh, poor you, poor
It
you.
was somebody had to do it, and that happened to be just me. And
Yeah.
then from there, I really got incredibly fascinated with human behavior and why were some leaders amazing and others not so much? Why were some cultures great and some not? So this is when I went back to get my doctorate and really trying to understand kind of human behavior, but specifically what made a leader great. So I got a doctorate in leader development and org design. And that's when I joined Humana to run their leadership institute. So that's a little bit about my
Wow.
my career.
That's crazy. Now, that's very impressive. But I got to tell you, the thing that really sparked my interest was who does a one-woman show on off-Broadway in New York City about curiosity?
Exactly. Isn't
What,
that
what,
cool?
That's crazy.
Another
So
one.
tell us about what's the genesis of that?
So what happened there was during COVID, I was a part of a mastermind group of other women executives around the country, and we would meet once a month, virtually, and what's happening, how are you coping, how's your family doing, and then what are your hopes and dreams. And I guess somewhere along the line, I mentioned one of my dreams was to do a one-woman show, to write it and to perform in a one-woman show. It was a dream out there, way in the distance. And in August of 2022, they all came to Louisville. They said, "We have something to celebrate." I said, "Well, there's never a better place than Louisville to celebrate." So we were chinking our glasses and laughing, and they said, "We are toasting to Deb." And I was puzzled, like, I didn't do anything. Like, no, I don't know what are you talking about? They go, "Oh, we forgot to tell you. We pitched your idea for your one-woman show, and you're booked in New York."
Oh, sweet. Wow.
And
That's
that's the
amazing.
power of people that believe in you. And at first, I tried to back out. I thought of everything possible to say I couldn't do it. And they said, "It's already booked. You're doing it." So then I went into writing. I'd never written the show, I'd never performed. And so the whole adventure of finding people that could help me adapt it to stage and could actually coach me and direct me through this. And long story short, it was a huge hit. We sold out, and I went on to do other cities as well.
Wow, that's amazing. What a great story. That's talking about pushing the uncomfortable zone of
Oh my
learning and
goodness.
growing. Oh my gosh,
Oh,
that's
I know it. The director would say, "Okay, at this point I need you upstage." And I'd be like, "What's upstage?" She's like,
yeah.
"Oh my gosh, I should be charging you more because you." But
Uh,
I learned a great deal.
that's wonderful. Now the other thing you did, which is probably not too different than that, is a TEDx talk, and you that was titled Two Truths and a Lie. And so, did you do that before the off-Broadway show or after?
It was after.
It was after. Okay, so you
Yeah.
had some experience a little bit on the stage, but it was well done. And you talk a lot about how curiosity kind of is the unsung hero of community and unity. So again, what attracted me to you and this topic too was I've always kind of loved that word curiosity. You know, it's just something that I do think it just really resonated with me that good leaders are curious. You know, I've told this before on this program, and I knew this person who had worked inside Obama's administration, and I said, well, if you could describe President Obama, how would you describe him? And he said intellectual curiosity. I
Mm.
thought that was really interesting. So, it's just a word that we hear all the time, yet maybe haven't developed it as much as you have. So just tell us a little bit about that TED Talk and what you're trying to get across about curiosity.
Yeah, so the nature of the title was that it was actually a TED Talk on at Walden Pond, just outside of Boston, and the theme for that year happened to be one of his quotes. David Thoreau's quote was, "In order to tell the truth, it takes two to tell the truth, one to speak and one to listen." And so my positioning on this was around, well, in order to be curious, you have to have someone, willing to listen and someone willing to speak. And so the two truths and a lie was around things like the lies we tell ourselves or the lies that we tell others. And when we get curious and ask ourselves questions and others questions, we can begin to break through the lies we tell ourselves.
And I've often said too with my clients and my leadership teachings and so on is that, one of the greatest leadership skills really is questions, how to ask a question and how to ask it in a way that it's not judgmental, it's not leading, it's really seeking someone else's opinion or perspective. And yeah, it's just that questions are more important than we think.
I would say, Steve, they are probably everything when it comes to building a relationship, whether that be with your partner, your children, or your employees, is the ability to ask a question and then hold it and listen to the response. When I like to when I work when I teach people how to coach, I say it's like the Karate Kid, the wax on, the wax off. So
Yeah.
coaching is about you ask a question and you listen. That's
Hmm.
all it is about. But we often get distracted when we're listening.
And in asking the question too, and people can tell this, it's got to be authentic in the way that you're asking to learn, not to give an answer. So, what can I learn from this person? What can I glean from this question that's going to help us both?
Yes, that's exactly it is. And what I see often when I'm teaching coaches to coach is they want to lead the witness. And it's one of you ask a question and then you listen, and based on what they've just said, that is your next question. If you're already thinking about your next question before they've stopped speaking, you've jumped the gun.
Yeah. And then the other thing I pulled out of that talk too, which I loved, is exploring the question with no urgency to find the answer.
Mhm.
So you may ask the question hoping to get an answer, but it may take you three or four or five more questions to really maybe get the answer you're hoping for.
Yeah, and it also might be that you're not meant to have an answer. You're meant to build a relationship.
Yeah. And then also too, just being able to appreciate the limits of our perspectives because we all have biases, we all have perspectives. And so as soon as you think you know it all or that your way is the highway, I think you're in trouble. So understanding the limits of your own perspective from your experiences is
Mm,
important.
so well said, Steve.
So when we look at, you also say in there too that, and you already mentioned it earlier, that when you have a listener and somebody asking questions and you're curious and both sides of the conversation are that way, then the magic really happens. And I think we've all been there where it's so fun to talk to somebody that just is curious and interested in you as you are in them. That's what really makes things fly. And we need to bring that into the business world and not use it so much as teaching and directing. It's more like learning and collaborating.
Absolutely. Last year, I was in Saudi Arabia and I was flying their airline, and I got this message that said, if you would like to buy out the whole seat, the whole row, for $48 US dollars, you could have the whole row. And I thought, I would never want to have the whole row. Like, I want someone next to me because some of the most amazing conversations I've had are with strangers on a plane or on a train or on a bus, heading to the airport. I'm like, there's no way I'm paying 48 US dollars to sit by myself.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think we've all been there. I've gotten on planes before and I know have stories where you're tired and you want to get home and so you put on your headphones and you open up your book and you kind of send the signal that I'm not available. Yet sometimes just exploring it at least a little bit, you do find some very interesting people and who knows who you're sitting next to. Maybe your next great opportunity.
Or just there are some people that I still remember the conversation and the takeaways I had from it, and I don't remember their name, and I don't know where we were flying to or from, but I remember the message.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, another thing you've done too is we already talked about it, but you've written this book, and for those on the video here, I'm holding it up, The Curiosity Curve. Great book, by the way, and very well done.
Yeah.
That's a big undertaking as well. So, did somebody talk you into doing that, or is that something you've always wanted to do?
It's something I've always wanted to do, but I didn't. I had many topics I was writing in my head, so to speak. And then when I had this hypothesis that the what was happening in corporate America was we were trying to solve the wrong problems. We were trying to solve performance problems, and we should be solving curiosity problems. And so I had this hypothesis, and then I had a group of researchers go out and do some primary research. And the question I asked them to study was, what is the relatedness between leadership, performance, and curiosity? Just a hypothesis. Like, I'm wondering. And 3 months later, they came back and said, oh my gosh, there's a direct correlation between leadership performance and curiosity. And that's when I knew I was onto something. And so I started doing the research. I put together an outline and then a manuscript. And I turned in the manuscript and I thought it was beautiful, Steve. It was amazing. And the publisher of Fast Company said, not so fast.
Yeah.
And they said, what we really want in here is more of your story and what led you to be curious and what led you to this hypothesis. And so then it goes back. I went back into rewriting.
Well, that's good advice because I think we can all probably agree that we remember and learn the most from a good story that kicks off some emotion within us. And storytelling is another great leadership skill. If you're good at it, I think people respond to it.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is I've been doing interviews and on my book tour is people don't say, that data and that study you had on page 33. I
Yeah,
mean, they say, that story you told about your daughter,
yeah.
that's what they remember that story you told about your mother? To your point, stories really anchor into our memory.
Well, that is a darn good story. So I want you to tell it again. So this is Madeline, your
Yeah.
daughter. So tell us that story and what you learned from it.
Yeah, so she was a freshman in high school, and one Saturday morning she came down the steps and she said, Mom, I really, really want to make the varsity basketball team. Now she's a freshman, so it's a big goal. And as her mother, I want her to have what she wants. And I'm like, man, this is exciting. I said, I go, what do you think your chances are? And she sadly said, well, not very good. I'm like, oh, why do you say that? And she goes, well, I can't dribble, I can't shoot, and I'm not very fast. Now, now most people underestimate our abilities, but I had seen her play before and she had accurately assessed her ability to do with those skills. And so I said, well, I'll tell you what we can do. We can send you to basketball camp. We can, hire a coach. I'm going to practice with you out in the backyard. And she's like, well, that's stupid. I go, why is that so stupid? She goes, well, tryouts are Monday. Not Saturday. She wants to try on Monday. And that's when I took a long pause and I just looked at her and I said, why is this so important to you? Like, why now? Why this year? And she got tears in her eyes and she said, well, this will be the last year I can play with my sister, who was a senior. So it wasn't that she wanted a varsity letter, she wanted the prestige, she wanted to be with her sister. So now I know her why and what's in her heart. So I got out a piece of paper and I said, all right, let's focus on what do we have. And she played varsity volleyball, right? So I said to her, what skills do you have there that we could apply to basketball? She thinks about it and I go, what position do you play? She goes, well, I'm an outside hitter. And I said, that's right. What do you do? She goes, well, I jump. I have to get over the net. I go, that's right. Basketball players have to jump. So I write it on the piece of paper. And I said, now, when you're up over the net, what are you doing? She goes, well, I'm like spiking the ball where the other players aren't. That's called hand-eye coordination. And I write that down. And I said, now, lastly, when you're in the back row and that ball comes over the net, you're digging it out. You know what you call that? That's called hustle. And you have that. She goes, oh, yeah. And you could just tell her confidence was building, because those are skills of a basketball player. And then I said, what else? She's like, no, that's good. That's my. I go, no, what else do you have? And she just was so confused. And I said, how about you're tall?
Mhm.
She had completely forgotten she was tall. When she went to kindergarten, she came home in tears because she goes, I'm a freak. I'm the tallest kid in my class. I mean, her whole life, she was like, I'm so tall. And the lesson I learned from that is, sometimes our greatest asset, because it's so natural, we forget about what it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I wrote the tall on that. And so when she went on the tryouts on Monday afternoon, I said, here's our plan. You're gonna run down the court, you're gonna plant yourself under the basket, you're gonna jump, rebound, pass the ball. Because those are things you can do. We're not gonna dribble. No, then not you. We're not going to shoot. That's not you. We're going to highlight the skills that you do have. And the point about that, what I learned about that is we have talents and that we have to leverage those. It's always nice to kind of close and build other skills, but let's really lean into what we have. So the story is she did make that team, and she went on to be the leading rebounder in the history of that school, boys or girls. Not the
Wow.
leading shooter, not the fastest, the leading rebounder. So that's the story that I speak about in the book.
That's such a great story, and it reminds me of a story I know of a basketball player who, a little different, but like he went into every game like, what can I do to help the team? Not what do I want to do or do I want to score or whatever. What does the team need at this time? And that's what made him a great player. And I think you did the same thing in a way as like, what is she good at? How can she help the team? She's not going to help the team by dribbling and shooting, but she certainly can help the team by rebounding and passing the ball to others and so on. So
Yeah,
a great
yeah,
team
yeah,
approach.
absolutely.
So, as kids, we all know we're born with all this curiosity, all the why questions and just fascination with everything. What happens when we're taught to be incurious? Why?
Hmm. So we are taught to be incurious. It just doesn't like we don't naturally wake up one day and say, I'm going to stop asking questions. We're socialized to be incurious. And what I mean by that is there's a study done out of London by a group of neuroscience, and they discovered that children, toddlers specifically, ask 298 questions a day. Now you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, they don't even talk. And it's like, well, if they're pointing at something, that's a question. And as adults, they say we ask about 5 questions. So we've learned to be incurious. So what happened? Well, you think about this. You go to school and you're, at least in North America, you're taught to sit in your chair, children are to be seen and not heard. Now, my daughter is a teacher and she'll say, Mom, we can't have mayhem in the classroom. I go, I agree, but maybe we've indexed too far. So we're then taught that curiosity killed the cat, don't open Pandora's box. If you were in the, Christian religion like I was, Eve got curious, she ate of the tree of knowledge, and then mayhem fell over the world, right? So we are fed these ideas about being curious. But
Or
guess
even
what?
in the legal profession, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. So,
Absolutely. When in the book I write that, curiosity killed the cat, and my editor came back and said, "Well, you need to cite that." And I'm like, "My mother." And then they go, no, you really have to cite it. I go, Miss Erickson, my first grade teacher. And so I was a little annoyed that I have to go research this because either research it or take it out. So I went back and I said, where did it come from? Well, you're not going to believe this. In 1589, William Shakespeare wrote a play in which he wrote, Curiosity killed the cat, comma, but satisfaction brought it back.
oh, they forgot the
Nobody
second
tells
piece.
us the back end of that. Now,
Yeah,
I think what kind of life would I had if I'd known curiosity wouldn't kill me in the
yeah.
sense of that. And so I'm so glad that my editor pushed me to cite it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about this curiosity curve and you talk about, in the book there's kind of four things to put your focus on. One is, exploration, obviously. And then there's focused engagement, inspirational creativity, and then openness to new ideas. So those are kind of the four things in the curve that you talk about. So just expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, so there are 4 factors that make up the curiosity curve. And the reason there is a cure curve is because if we're too curious and we're continuously asking questions, we don't get anything done. But if we're not asking enough questions, then we're not being innovative in that sense. So that's why there is an optimal level of curiosity. But the 4 factors, exploration is, you're working with someone that's in explore mode when they say things like, I wonder, what if? I mean, like they're way out there because they're looking for new ways of doing things. So those are explorers. The next one is inspirational creativity. Now, these are the people that might say, you know what? I was reading the Wall Street Journal and then I was reading People magazine. So they begin to put different ideas together based on different things that they're reading. The next one is openness to new ideas. You're working with someone that's in this factor in the sense that they say, oh, tell me more. Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that. And then the last one is focused engagement. And focused engagement is about once you've decided on the action that you're going to take, as these are the people that can hone in and actually get it done.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. You also said that I thought in today's day and time, I thought was very interesting. And you said that curiosity is crucial in a democracy.
Mhm.
So we can look at that from a government perspective, but we can also look at that from a business perspective. So expound on that a little bit.
Well, the sense of when we start with the mindset that when we enter into a relationship or a debate or an argument is in the sense that they have a different brain and they have different beliefs, they have different values than I do, but I'm going into this with an open mind because I want to learn more about how they feel about something, how what where does this come from. And when you go in with this notion of being open versus I'm going to go in and argue, I'm going to debate, I'm going to try to win, we everybody loses. And so when you think about what's happening now in our country, is everyone is just locking into their own point of view of the way things need to be versus relaxing and say, let's have a conversation and let's have it rooted in curiosity.
I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in my company, we had this exercise called PDSA, which stood for plan, do, assess, and then study and then tweak it. And so we would have these things like, let's say something would come up and someone would say, well, maybe we could do this. And then often the leader might say, well, we've done that before. That'll never work. We tried that before. That's not going to work. But we try to encourage a culture of, okay, well, let's try that. So we're gonna we identify the issue, we come up with a plan, we implement it for a few weeks and see if it changes anything. And if it does, then we keep doing more of this. If not, maybe we need to reassess and tweak the plan. And we just do that. And it's amazing how many times leaders in that situation would say, I thought this was the dumbest thing ever. This is never going to work. And we did it. And oh my God, my eyes got opened and look what happened. And it did work. So
Yeah.
even, we have these, like we said earlier, strong biases that sometimes think that we know the answer, but the willingness to just give it a shot and give it a try with someone else's perspective may unlock the secret.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say it also depends on your level of risk tolerance, right? So if
Yeah.
it's a low level risk, we might say, yeah, go for it. Let's see what happens.
Right.
When the stakes get higher and there's millions of dollars at stake, that's when trust really comes into hand and saying, all right, they've done their due diligence, they've done the analysis, let's give it a try.
Yeah, that's for sure. We talk about, we learn from our failures and, maybe we should, be fine with that. But, if it's a small thing that turns into a failure, it's one thing. If you're flying a, $50 million fighter jet, you don't want to have a big failure because that's not a good thing. So there's
Yes.
different levels of it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And recently I was talking to my grandson who's 6, and he had played a baseball game and they had lost. And I said, hey, I'm really sorry you all lost. He goes, there's either winning or learning.
Oh my God,
And
6
I'm
years
like,
old.
winning or learning? I go, well, what did you learn? Well, and he started talking about, we got to practice our hitting, and he says, that's what we learned today. And I just, it was a beautiful lesson for me, winning or learning.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty perceptive for a 6-year-old. So that's awesome. I also love the line that you said, we all love Ted Lasso. It's funny how people said I should watch that show, and I thought, oh, that's gonna be silly. I'm not really gonna watch that show. And I did, and it hooked me just like it hooked everybody else, I think. But he talks about be curious, but not judgmental. And I do think a lot of times when we talk about asking questions, there are ways of people asking questions that have judgments attached to it. So, you have to be skilled at asking a question that opens up the possibilities as opposed to putting a narrow spin on it.
Absolutely. And it's also one about I mean, how are you approaching it? You could ask a question that seems like you're really interested, but if you ask it in a way that, wait, they're not really interested. They're just again leading the witness in the sense of, but if you go into it with the right mindset, the right openness to learn, and you ask a question and then you listen.
You also talk about the relationship between empathy and curiosity.
Mhm.
So explain that a little bit.
Well, just in the sense that it's about not being attached to what they say in the sense of I don't have to agree with you. I don't have to take your side. I don't even have to debate or argue with you. But in the sense that empathy means I have a greater understanding of what it's like to walk in your shoes with your experience. And what that does, it strengthens our relationship and it gives me a greater understanding of who you are as a person.
Mhm. One of my favorite things to hear sometimes, and you'll hear it every once in a while, somebody will say, no one's ever asked me that before.
Mm,
So I think if you get that response, you're probably digging deep and you are curious because if no one's
yeah.
asked it before, yeah.
And it's a sense of caring.
Yeah.
I want to know you, and if I want to know you, that's up to me.
And you also talk about the relationship between being curious and having humor behind it too. And those can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, curiosity, we talk about, a lot of people will say, oh, well, this is one of these things that you either have it or you don't. And I think you make a challenge to all of us in the book that you can practice it, you can nurture it, and you can become more of a curious person. So tell us what your thoughts are on that.
That we know just from research, not my primary research, but another group of neuroscientists determined that two things in this study they did was a longitudinal study is that one, curiosity is contagious. So if you are around curious people, like for you, it looks like you enjoy wine and just beyond a passion is like I'm sure you're incredibly interested in how wine is made and the flavors and the dirt and all that go into making beautiful wine in the sense of if you're around other people that share that same interest. So curiosity is contagious. And secondly, that curiosity is not a trait, but it's a state. And if you are around other people who are curious, like a leader, then your level of curiosity goes up as well.
Yeah, interesting, interesting. And I think you also make the statement that curiosity is needed in this in the pursuit of knowledge. If you're not curious, then how do you get to the next level, or how do you uncover the new findings? So that's part of becoming more knowledgeable and being smarter and what we do and the way we look at things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's this, what right now people are beginning to wind down their year and they're thinking about their New Year's resolution and what do they want to do different next year. And I encourage people to say, what do I want to do differently? As and ask yourself, what is it? What do I want to feel next year? What is it I want to learn next year? And begin to pursue those things.
When you work with companies and clients and leaders and you find out that maybe they don't have an appreciation for this curiosity thing we've been talking about. How do you approach that with them? How do you teach somebody to nurture it and get better at it? What's your approach?
Well, I also have a validated diagnostic tool, meaning so if I'm working with somebody and they're really serious about curiosity, we have them take the assessment first. It's a short assessment, 26 questions, but it'll tell you your level of curiosity in those four factors. And when we understand what current state is, then we can begin to build a plan around what better looks like.
So what are some of the tools or strategies within the plan, depending on what you get back from the assessment?
Yeah, so I'm gonna give you an example. I had a group of C-suite. So this was the CEO and their direct reports. And he said, he approached me first to say, can you come lead a 2 day strategy session? And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, we're losing margin, we're losing revenue, we're losing employees, and we're way behind our competitors on putting new products in the market. I think you agree. And not a good spot to be in, right?
Yeah,
So he
that's
says, can you lead this strategy session for us? I said, absolutely. And would you be willing to do a session on curiosity so we can have a better understanding of the current state of curiosity of your executive? So they did that. So what I do is people don't know each other's scores. They have an aggregated score of the team. So I know the individuals, and then we have an aggregated score. Now, personally, they know their score because I've given it to them, but I don't share it with others. So openness to new ideas. I put their chart up and on a PowerPoint, and they saw the distribution of people on their team around openness to new ideas. And guess what? 8 of them scored high in openness to new ideas. Now you can imagine my perplexity of like, wait, why are they not putting new products in the market if they're all open to new ideas? And there was just one individual that scored low. And so I put the score up and I said, help me understand why you wouldn't be putting new products out. Like crickets, like nobody wanted to talk, right? And I go, well, it's just, I don't know, I've never seen this before. And so the CEO raised his hand and said, that low score is me.
Yeah, oh boy. Okay.
And so I admire him for the vulnerability to drink. Now, his team knew it, right? They already knew it,
Yeah,
but nobody
this
wanted to
isn't
speak
new
up.
information. Yeah.
So, we'd built up enough safety over the last 2 days. And I said, well, how does that for the team? How does this show up? And they're like, oh man, we do all this analysis and the SWOT work. We bring it into him. And he says no. And like one by one, they started talking about their experience. And I said to the CEO, what do you make of this? And he said, it's true. He goes, but I'm the founder. Like, this is my baby. I think I have all the best ideas and all the best solutions. And I said, and how's it working for you?
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
it just
limiting.
this incredible shift at a team level to say, he's the most influential person and he's blocking what's happening in the organization. So this opportunity, when you see it in front of you, you begin to say for him, how do I want to be different?
Yeah. And do you think we're not naming names or companies here, but did he get better at it? Did he see it and change?
So they're just getting ready to take the assessment again 1 year later
Oh, that'll be interesting.
to see what type of movement and then in addition to uh, I I'll know more when we do the assessment, but my sense is they're opening new locations, so that's got to be a good sign.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure. You also talk in the book about how, this culture of curiosity, if you can create it like what you just described, really helps us respond to the rapid changes in the work in the business environment now with agility. So we do need this. I mean, we can't just sit on our laurels and the way it's always been type of thing. We need to look at things new and different all the time.
I mean, absolutely, absolutely. It's always looking at your environment, your external environment and what is your competitors doing, what's happening from a legislative perspective. And those are all asking questions. And then the next part is, well, how open are we to try new things?
Do you think that leaders look at asking questions? Do you think they look at that as if they ask questions or they go to their team and they're asking questions, that that's somehow a sign of weakness? Do you think that's
Absolutely.
fair? Yeah.
It's it's 100% true. So, as leaders, unfortunately, we are taught to have all the answers.
Mhm.
And most likely the reason we're a leader is because we were really competent as being an individual contributor and then we got promoted again. And the unfortunate thing is one is we're taught that we need to have all the answers, but then the second thing that happens is that we have so much constraints around our time. So typical environment is somebody comes in, they have a problem. They put the problem on the table. The leader and the employer looking at the problem, and the leader says, go do X, Y, and Z, and let me know what happens, right? When you do that, you're playing the short game because you've just given someone the answer. You didn't help them develop, you didn't help them think, you didn't help them grow. What if we lived in a world when the person comes in, they put the problem on the table, and the leader is focused on the employee and ask a series of questions that helps them think for themselves and build their confidence that they can solve problems? That's the world I want to live in.
When I was a CEO, most of my team, well, everybody on the team knew that if they came into my office with a problem, that they had to have at least two or three potential solutions to that problem before they presented it to me. So again, it was just hopefully I was doing what you're talking about was like, okay, well, what do you think? What's your idea? And then we can, go from there. Because I do think that it not only limits the potential of the new ideas, but it also develops dependency. Like, oh, well, he'll solve it. He'll make all the decisions, or she'll do all this and she'll tell us what to do. And that's not usually, I mean, there's talented people out there that maybe make most of the right decisions, but there's so much more, and not one person can really be that good. It's the collective wisdom that really rolls.
Amen. It's all about the collective and having, just having this culture of it. We're in it together, and together we can solve this.
I wonder why that's so hard for leaders to grasp. Think back on your experience, and, being vulnerable, I think is important. I'll give an example of mine. When I got my position, I was fairly young and inexperienced, in that role. And, you're afraid to let people know or see that maybe you aren't as knowledgeable as they want you to be, or you're not as seasoned as you should be. So sometimes you tend to overstep the other way and probably make decisions that you shouldn't even be making at all. And
Yeah.
so it takes a while and maybe humility to kind of experience that and realize that you don't have to have all the answers.
Absolutely. In when we got our research back, and we also put it up against the work that Gallup was doing around disengagement. And Gallup has been doing engagement studies for, I don't know, probably 2 decades. And in the history of reporting engagement of employees, that it's never been so low. And particularly what's low is millennials. So millennials are 29 to 40, and they are 65% are saying they are disengaged. Now, this is a problem because this is one, they're not producing, but two, this is the group that we would be developing for the future executives, right? And they're saying we're not interested in that. So we did a focus group and we asked them what's the source of their disengagement. And to your point, Steve, they said um, the person with the most information are least consulted, meaning I'm on the front line or I'm working directly on this project and I'm not being consulted on what could make it better. I mean, if a leader simply engaged and asked them questions, just amazing what could happen.
Yeah. And I hear that story all the time of all the people that I interview on this show. I mean, I hear that theory that you just said, that people have experiences like that, but yet it just seems like we're just so far away from that being the norm.
It is. And, we're experiencing it now with the low productivity, all the layoffs, retooling. That's what we're faced with.
Yeah.
But we can change it.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. So let's go back to that one woman show on off-Broadway. Tell me, what did you learn through that experience? What was the most aha moment when you were all said and done and you look back on it now?
Get help in the sense that I wrote this one woman show, and a friend of a friend said, oh, we have someone that writes for Broadway. He's willing to take a look and give you some feedback, just as a friend. And so he was very nice about it, but essentially what he said was, you suck. This sucks. Like, but he said, you wrote a keynote. And I'm like, yeah. That's
That's
what
what
I
I
do.
do. That's
That's
what
what
I
I
do.
do. He said, what you need, and I've never heard this language before, you need someone that can adopt it to stage. And they're going to need to take your words and make it into a show, make it into a story. And so I found someone that could help me do that. And when I found her, she says, so you need like a sound engineer. You need someone that can punch it up and add music and that. So my whole thing about this was I went into something that I knew nothing about, but I knew to get help. And I was just very fortunate that the right people showed up at the right time and helped us create something really beautiful.
So let's look at that a little bit further. So you say you give keynotes and you go and inspire people and put, ideas in their head and maybe we should try this and try that. But yet that person for your show came and said we need to, what was the term you used? Staged it, or we need to
We need to adopt it to stage. So,
adopt it to stage.
yeah.
So so is that something that we should learn as leaders? Like we may know what to say, we may have all the things to throw out there and they sound good, but can we adopt it to stage or can we adopt it to our
Mhm.
company? That probably takes a different skill.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about this, I've never thought about that. So, in the thing of, I've never been asked that question. But Steve, I really like this in the sense of what I've learned over my 4 decades in corporate America is that no two people are alike. And so you can't lead everybody in the same way. So, in a sense, is that when I'm in front of an individual, I got to understand what are their capabilities, what are their inspirations, what are their ambitions, and being able to tap into that to get them what they need. My favorite question to ask when I take over a new team is individually, I'll ask, how do you like to be led?
Mhm.
Someone might say, just stay out of my business. If I need help, I'll come to you. Others were like, I really need a thinking partner. I like someone that can collaborate. And so that helps me understand how do I get the best out of them by being the best leader I can be for them, not for the team.
Right. And helping them to discover that, because sometimes people can't always say it or verbalize it. I know that for me personally, I can remember the day that I figured out that I'm a verbal decision maker. So if I'm in a meeting or we have a big decision to make or whatever, I may state my opinion and what I think we should do or whatever, but then I ask you what you think and I ask somebody else what they think and then we debate that a little bit and then we look at some other things. And through that process of verbal discussion back and forth, I come to my decision or consider, where we go forward from there. But to me, I need that process. I don't go in an office and write down a bunch of stuff and look at a bunch of books and then say, okay, here's what we need to do. I need that verbal part of it. But that's me. That's my personality. That's what I discovered. So I think understanding that of everybody on the team and how what they need and what helps them will help open up the ideas.
Yeah, and so you just created a thought for me in the sense that as I would ask, how do you like to be led? They're going to tell me that. But what if you were to say, this is how I typically lead? You just said I'm a verbal processor, a decision making. So if you went into somebody and they didn't know that, they'd be thinking, oh my gosh, why is he talking so much? Right?
Yeah,
Like, can't he
exactly.
just make a decision?
Yeah.
Versus you saying, can we talk this out? I do my best thinking when I'm talking and I have someone that can bounce it around with me. That's
Yeah.
that's leadership.
And I'd be interested in your perspective of this too, because, when I think of it this way, is that's more in a way a more of a feminine trait than a masculine trait. I think sometimes we as men think that we have to know the answer and we have to be strong and we have to just go forward. And I think that embracing, that other side of things, in fact, when I came home and so excited, and I told my wife about this, she just laughed and she goes, "So that's why we have to talk everything to death before we make a decision." And I go, "Yeah, because that's kind of what I do." And so I'm interested. Do you think in our male-dominated world, sometimes in business and leadership, bringing in some more of those feminine traits, I think are better, are going to help us if we can just embrace them.
Absolutely. And I think the key here is sharing with other people how you process information. you know, and them having an understanding, oh, this is why you do that. Yeah, this is why I do this. Now, in this situation, your wife, might have been irritated because, oh my gosh, here he goes again. He's got right. But in a sense, if you were to say to her, can we take 10 minutes to help? I want
Yeah.
to talk this out. And then after 10 minutes, we'll make a decision.
Yeah.
Or at a minimum, we'll table it.
Well, and that's understanding your team, or in this situation we just described, your spouse. You know, we've been married long enough to where she knows that's just, for me, that's what I need. And if she doesn't allow me to do that, then I'm frustrated and I'm maybe not on board. So as we're running teams and we have, 5 or 6 people on our team, we have to know the personalities of each of those people to a level of understanding what they need to make decisions and what they need to go forward so that we can all go forward together. And if you don't allow them to do that, you're going to have that one person that's not on board or not engaged.
Absolutely. I have a daughter who has now figured me out. And when I call her on the phone and I said, here's what I'm thinking about, and I'm speaking and thinking at the same time. And then she'll stop me and she'll say, what am I listening for? And then that focused me. Oh, I want you to know I'm trying to make a decision. And at the end of the conversation, I'm hoping you can help me make this decision. But she's like, what am I listening for? Right? Like,
Yeah,
let's stay focused, Mom. What am I listening for? Because
yeah.
she goes, am I listening just because you're excited or you want to vent or do you really want to make a decision at the end? I'm like, oh, I really want to make a decision. She goes, okay, I'm going to listen differently now.
Yeah, and that's very intuitive. I can remember our daughter, when she was like in middle school, would come to my wife and say, "Can you read my article that I've prepared for school?" And my wife was very smart to say, "Okay, I'd love to, but what are you, like you said, what are you looking for? Because do you want me to edit it? Do you want me to give you some ideas, or do you want me just to tell you it's good?" And knowing that changes what you do, because if she's just looking for you to say it's good, and then you come back with all these red marks of all these edits and all these things you should do different, you got somebody who's unhappy. So sometimes asking that question of what are you looking for, what level of input do you want, is important. Or you may say it from the other way, this is the level of input that I'm looking for.
Yeah. And then at the end, when it's done, you say, was this helpful?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've had somebody, no, it wasn't helpful. Like, all right, what would have been more helpful? Right.
I have another funny story. When my one of my daughters was really young, I was putting her to bed one night, and she said, "Hey, Daddy, what does history mean?" And I'm like, "Oh, what a great question! Gosh, what a great question!" So I go into this whole thing about, history is what's been done in the past, and we hopefully learn from it so we don't do the bad things again. And I go on and on about this whole evolutionary thing, at history, whatever. She listens intently the whole time. And then at the end, she says, "Well, what does it mean when my cousin tells me I'm history?" And so obviously, I didn't even get close to what she was looking for as an answer. I just said, "Oh, assumed that I was going to give this big philosophical thing," and she just wanted to know why her cousin said she's history. So, yeah,
I love that she listened though until the
yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah. She did, she did. So, in anticipation of our discussion today, what haven't I asked you, or what haven't we covered that you'd like to get in the program today?
Just that if people want to go deeper in understanding curiosity and the power of curiosity, they can buy my book on Amazon. It's called The Curiosity Curve. That
Yeah.
would be one. Also, on my website, you can take the curiosity assessment, free assessment, and you can understand your current level of curiosity. And my website is www.debraclary.com.
So when you take that assessment and you get your score, or however you call it, what do you do then?
Oh, well, then it'll actually give you some information in terms of ways in which you can improve. And then if you're really interested on my website, you can call me. You can email me, you can call me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you.
So what are you doing right now? Are you coaching individual clients? Are you working with companies and their leadership development program? Tell us a little bit about what's your day to day now.
Yeah, so a couple of different aspects of what I do. One is I do keynotes to large organizations, so either intact or associations, or I'm working with executive teams. So I might start with the CEO and their executive teams around. I do strategy sessions, but I also do sessions on curiosity. So the team will take assessments and we'll talk about where there's alignment and misalignments. And like all assessments, you do them because you want to better understand yourself and others and the team. And then I do executive coaching.
Do you think most people seek you out for executive coaching because they know you're the curiosity expert, or do they just are they just looking for coaching and then you bring the curiosity piece in?
I think the 4 decades of corporate experience at Frito-Lay, Coca-Cola, Jack Daniels, working for Fortune 40 companies, I think is why they seek me out because they know I'm probably someone that knows how to navigate complex systems. So I think that's where they start is I have experience in that area, and then also being the a doctorate in leader development and org design. So I think that's why they find me, and then they realize I'm wildly curious.
Okay. And what do you think when you look at, and this is a real general question, but I'm always curious about this, is when people come to you and want you to hire you as a coach, what is it that they see or what is it that they're lacking that they need help in if they haven't identified as being more curious?
It's interesting. The folks I've been coaching recently, and I coach mostly executive people, is that they feel stuck in terms of what they want to do next. They've had a high level of success, and now they're saying, "What's next?" And that's where we can really dig into their values, their ambitions, and how to get on the path where they find real joy in the work they do.
And isn't it interesting? I experienced this too, that a lot of people that come to you that are looking for that next level are already pretty good leaders and doing well and have success. You rarely get the train wreck. You rarely get somebody who's just said, I have a complete disaster. How do I get out of this? Right?
Yeah. Well, and there's this correlation. And I don't know if it's scientific, but you think about it, those people that have had this incredible success are probably the ones that ask for help and ask for coaching. They're in this continuous movement of how do I get better? And sometimes I need help getting better. But those that are on a train wreck rarely ask for help. And that's probably why they're in a train wreck.
Yeah. Well said. So at this point in the interview, uh, Deborah, I always ask my guests the same common question. That question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
When someone asks you a question, the best answer is, I don't know.
Absolutely. Wow. So is that I assume that your the daughter Madeline you told the story about, she's probably not playing for the WNBA right now. Uh,
She is not.
uh,
She's actually a teacher.
yeah,
So
that's
she's
well
teaching
that
others.
that's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that story. Sometimes those personal stories are the most potent, and it certainly was one that I loved. And thank you for sharing that today. So.
My pleasure, Steve.
Well, thanks for being on the show. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot. I think, again, like I said at the beginning of this, the idea resonated with me because I love the word curious, and I think you're right on with that, and putting emphasis on that and helping people understand it and learn how to, get better at being more curious. I think only helps. So, thanks for all your work on that. Sounds like you're doing fun things, and it was great talking to you today.
My pleasure, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, well, maybe we'll see each other down the road one of these days.
Awesome.
Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.